Live from the House of LeMay Makeup and Dressing Room.
Here comes Amber. Stop what you're doing. Here comes Amber. She's just doing what she can. Here comes Amber. Cue the spotlight. Here comes Amber with 2 drinks in her hand. The matriarch of fashion, secret sewer glasses, you can't look away. Ask her, does she do it? There's really nothing to it. She's got that feminine game. If you have a party, or if you're feeling naughty, call up the House of LeMay. Here comes your favorite gal. Here comes your queen. Here comes the talk of town. And we're live tonight. The music starts playing. It's time for cabaret. And we're live tonight.
Dude, welcome to the Amber Live Show. I'm Rusty Peen bringing you the show. So make sure that you like, share, and subscribe following those links down below. But before we go any further, here comes the news. What's up, bud? Welcome to The Alternative Writer. I'm Rusty Peen, and here comes the news. Making an impact. Dude, Taylor Swift played a show in Edinburgh, Scotland a couple weeks ago for 200,000 people. Now, dude, on the Friday night show, there were 73,000 people in the audience who were jumping and dancing along. That so much that the activity was picked up on geological surveyors. Dude, the British Geological Survey, the group that studies seismology, they found that the Swifties were jumping so much that it caused the Earth to move 23.4 nanometers. Now, dude, this isn't the first time that a Taylor Swift show has caused increased seismic activity. During a stop in Seattle on this same tour, her fans jumped so much that the seismic activity was reported to be the equivalent of a 2.3 magnitude earthquake, better known to her fans as Swiftquake. Dude, a woman on TikTok named Jessica Perez is getting famous for a $72 invoice. Jessica needed a babysitter for her daughter Victoria, so she called up her sister to watch Victoria for the weekend. When Jessica got her kid back, she also got an invoice from her sister itemizing Victoria's activities. The list included flushing the toilet 5 times at 50 cents a flush, $7 for using electricity to play My Little Pony, the video game, for 20 minutes, 3 cups of apple juice for $2.50 each, $10 for peeing the bed, and $1.50 for paint used when drawing. Dude, on the one hand, Jessica's sister is pulling a total dick move right now. On the other hand, there's been lots of stories about weaponized incompetence. Now, dude, I've been incompetent since before I knew it could be used as a weapon. But it's when you do such an intentionally bad job at something that no one's going to ask you to do that thing a second time. So it sounds to me like Jessica's sister doesn't want to watch Victoria again. Dude, that ain't working hard. That's working smart. And speaking of weaponized incompetence, cicadas are back. Dude, did you know that only the male cicadas make that high-pitched buzzing noise? It's a mating call that they use to attract the female cicadas. Only the males can do it. Which has got to be a real pain in the ass if you're a lady cicada. Dude, if I were a lady cicada, I'd probably just cut my losses and go for a cockroach. Come to think of it, I'd go for a roach right about now. Only I could find my ashtray. Anyway, That's all the time we have for today and all the news that's fit to peen. I'm Rusty Peen from The Alternative Writer. Dun, 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 dun. Dude, welcome back to the show. Let's bring Russell in and talk to Russell. Russell!
Rusty, how are
Hey,
you?
dude. What's going on, bud?
Not too much. How's the bathroom?
It's still standing. It hasn't caved in yet. Haven't gotten any floods from the upstairs neighbors. All the plumbing's working out, bud. Yeah?
Well, that's great. That's great. You're moving up out of the sub-basement any day now.
Yeah, bud. We got some septic issues in the trailer. Had to move out to the first floor, ground floor trailer.
All right. Well, you know what I want to talk about? Where people can watch you tonight the best way. And you know where that is? That's YouTube. Because
Sweet.
if you go to, it is. If you go to YouTube and go to youtube.com/Amber Live, you can see Rusty in full HD. And there's also a great chat room there where you can chat with all your friends and probably Rusty and who knows who else will be in the chat room. So get on over to YouTube, watch the show there. That's where we recommend it. And you know,
Russell, what if I throw a boot at my computer or my TV set and I can't watch it anymore, but I still get great audio coming in clear?
Well, as sometime after the show or tonight to replace it, you can go back and watch one of our old episodes, which are out there on all the podcasts. Wherever you can find a good podcast, you go listen to the Amber Live interviews. So we recommend that for like when you're driving to work or after you threw your boot at the TV and you only got radio.
That's pretty sweet, dude. I also only got
one
boot.
Your phone. What?
Yeah, but I also got one boot and it's electrified.
Yeah, that'd be the end of that boot. Don't be putting it back on. All right. Well, tonight's
Dude, what's happening on the show tonight, bud? Who's Amber talking to?
Much. We actually have a long show. It's one of our favorite guests. We have so many, and we'd love to run them all, but they are all up on YouTube, so you can go back and see them all. All as of tonight, 199 episodes.
Holy crap, bud.
I know. So
almost
go check
190. 10. That's a lot of episodes. I don't know.
190 10's a lot. You are correct, man. Math is hard.
Yeah,
but tonight on 199, we're rerunning one of our favorite guests of the multitude of favorite guests, but it is Charles Busch, and we are rerunning part 1 of his interview. So after this, you'll have to go back to YouTube and look up part 2 and watch it because it was just so long and such a good interview that we can't fit the whole thing into one episode. Because you'd be here all night. So
I'm super stoked. Charles Busch was so entertaining the first time around. I already had to watch it twice, so I'm up for watching it a third time.
Woohoo! Look at you adding things up. 3. All right, so here's Charles Busch.
He's an American playwright, actor, director, novelist, drag legend, cabaret entertainer, and Tony Award winner. He's been a major voice in theater, movies, and television for the past 45 years. It's my pleasure to talk to Mr. Charles Busch. Charles, come on in.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Hello. It is such a pleasure to be able to talk to you. I have so many questions.
Well, I do have to give you one correction, though, that I was a Tony nominee, but I didn't win.
Oh, you did. Well, you should have.
Oh, I was robbed.
Who won that year?
Oh, some little play nobody ever heard of called Proof. and the other nominees were these people I've never heard of: August Wilson and Tom Stoppard.
Oh wow! And you didn't beat them?
I don't know why, But actually, the wonderful thing is that I was so overwhelmed that I was nominated, and I never ever thought that was going to be. And so and I knew I wouldn't win. So I went into this whole circus of the Tonys with the kind of a wonderful, kind of relaxation of just being able to enjoy the outrageousness of the experience and not be all nervous. However, that said, those last 5 seconds while they're, saying the nominees, I think, What if they all cancel each other out? And the thing is, what I do not understand when I watch these award shows is when people win, an Oscar or a Tony or Emmy, and they get up there and like, oh my God, I don't even have no idea what to say. I mean, I just fight you and all these things. There's like a month between the nomination announcement and the awards. There's not one moment that you stood in front of the bathroom mirror and started, just going over your thoughts. Because I mean, I've been planning acceptance speeches since I was 9 years old. Haven't you?
But I have noticed that, like if it's for the Oscars, that if they have a theater background, they are more prepared, or more, I should say, more composed.
A bit more, yeah. Yeah, but I never get that. I don't have an idea what to say. Really? Because I knew I wouldn't win, but I can't say that I didn't, pose in front of the mirror and this award, what this means to me, and I like that.
Oh, of course. All right, you've done so much over the past half century. I mean, obviously you started at a very young age. What are your first memories of being creative or seeing something and thinking, I like that. I want to do that?
Oh, that's an interesting way of asking. I feel like I always had a creative imagination. I was just one of those little gay children who, I was lucky that I basically grew up in New York. And I had a wonderful aunt, rather like Auntie Mame, my Aunt Lillian, who took me under her wing and actually eventually, very much like Auntie Mame, adopted me. I went to live with her when I was 14. But even before that, I spent so much time with her, and I was just one of those kids that could find the enchantment in anything. If Aunt Lillian took me to go fabric shopping because she was going to make new drapes, and at 7 years old, I saw a basket of fabric remnants, and I pick up the piece of glittery stretch fabric, and I could spend an hour just fascinated by, there's one side is shiny, the other side is matte. I was like, I was part of that kind of kid. There's many of them, and fortunately for me, I was so encouraged. A lot of kids who have that great imagination grow up in families or situations where they're stifled and they're not encouraged. And I was really lucky that everything I did was a work of genius. And so it gave me, even though the outside world might have thought I was just, an oddball. And
do you remember the first thing you wrote or performed?
Well, I gather that I don't really remember, but people tell me that they show up on Facebook, who were kids in my neighborhood when I was very, very little, and seem to remember all sorts of plays that we were doing in the backyard that I was bossing people around. I don't remember that at all. Is that you?
Yes.
I thought you looked familiar. But I wrote my first, I'd say, full-length play when I was 11, and it was kind of nobody seemed to notice that it was a complete mashup between The Heiress and The Barretts of Wimpole Street. I'd just grown up watching these movies on TV, and so I just was entranced by it.
Did your aunt take you to any Broadway shows?
Yes. I started going to the theater when I was, I guess, 8. And the first Broadway show I saw was a musical called Tavarich, starring Vivien Leigh. And I guess that was 63, so I would have been 8 to 9. And I'd already seen Gone with the Wind and was just obsessed with Vivien Leigh. So I remember quite vividly, it was such an important thing, the first Broadway show you see, and Vivien Leigh. And,
was it a musical?
Yeah, it's a musical. Her one musical. Yeah.
Huh. I don't recall that show.
Yeah. Well, it was a huge hit. She won the Tony for it.
What? Oh, she did win.
Yeah. Okay. She won. Yeah. I'm sure it made a lovely speech.
What other shows did you see as a kid?
Well, we tended to see a lot of flops and not the big hits because my aunt belonged to it's something called the Macy's Theater Club, where you would get before the Broadway season would start. They would give you a list of all the shows that are opening, and then you would buy your tickets in advance, and you had to kind of have ESP to figure out what is going to be the hit. And we had terrible ESP because we didn't see Hello Dolly or Fiddler on the Roof. We saw these sort of famous flop musicals that are now rather legendary, for the wrong reasons. But then later, then sometimes then we would see later we get kind of half price tickets, they'd call them twofers, that you could, they would give you 2 tickets for the price of 1 for some of the big hits when they were not such big hits anymore. So we did see some of the big shows, but we saw a lot of flops. Yeah. But the thing is, I in a way, it didn't matter to me as a little kid. I wasn't looking at it with that kind of critical faculty. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me that I didn't become a set designer, because what stuck with me about some of the shows were the visuals. There was a musical that was not successful called Baker Street that was based on Sherlock Holmes, and I just remember there was some incredible big musical number where they were chasing across the roofs of London, and the set just kept moving and changing, and so that just whoa, Or I'll remember another show, The Revolving Turntable, and how the sets kept moving so quickly, and stuff like and color. The movie for I was taken to see rather adult movies at a very young age, and often
In Times Square?
Yes. Well, Aunt Lillian liked to go see the second run movies. When a movie would not be playing at the big fancy theater, they'd play at one of the theaters on 42nd Street, which was already a little dicey, but we would see things there. But I remember like the movie of Gypsy from 1962, just the colors of that movie, the reds, and then the incredible blue of Natalie Wood's gown, and just those things just stuck. Or Gone with the Wind, just Belle Watling's boudoir, and just the colors, just and so in a way, that's, I think, my apartment looks like it's out of Gigi. It's just, I like the reds and the intense color.
Yes, you talk about your apartment. Now, there's a video out there. Please, my audience, please Google Charles Busch apartment, and there's a tour of it, like a 4-minute tour.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
It's called, the site is called apartmenttherapy.com.
Apartment, but it's a beautiful apartment. Wait till apartment. It's beautiful. So you moved to you started living in New York permanently at 14. No, what high school did you go to when you were there?
Oh, well, when I was flunking out of grade school. I went through a bad period, and because my mother died when I was 7, and I just kind of was drifting along in a way, almost being raised by myself for a number of years with my sister, and so it got to the point where I really was in very bad shape, and couldn't really focus, and so I was going to be left back. And that was when my aunt, who was my mother's older sister, stepped in, and she took me to live with her ostensibly just for the summer, so I could go to summer school, and if I passed those exams, then I could continue with my class. And I was going to school in Westchester, in a suburb of New York City called Hartsdale. But Aunt Lillian wanted to keep me in New York, and then I got to live with my aunt full time in New York City, where she could, really give me a hard time and try to, instill in me just the basic skills of studying, of concentration. I never really quite got it. I was able just to get better, but I never really succeeded. But enough I got into college. That was the goal.
Yeah.
That was the big goal.
You went to Northwestern University.
Yeah.
How and why did you get there?
We wondered. When I got accepted in, my aunt was like, how the hell did that happen? I don't know, really, because I was a very prestigious school. But it was hard for me when I got to Northwestern being kind of newly sexualized gay to throw myself into these acting classes where you had to use yourself, but in playing these straight roles. There were no, at that time, there was no Torch Song Trilogy or Angels in America or any of these roles today over the past 30 years, that are for androgynous young men. The important thing for me was that I met some really interesting people, students, and who later became real colleagues of mine, particularly one person in particular, Ken Elliott, who I was friendly with at Northwestern, but then after we graduated, we stayed in touch, and he came to New York. We ended up becoming roommates, and he became the director, producer of all of my early plays. Then we started a theater company together. So the great thing about Northwestern was that I met Ken, basically, is what it is. That was worth the 4 years. But I was almost never cast in a play. I just was too I was too gay. And what was, I must say, I pat myself on the back, was that I had enough sense to see that, okay, I'm not being cast in any of these plays, but I still feel like I have something in me that's special to offer, and I didn't let it destroy me. I think somebody else might have just thought, well, that's it for me. I don't fit in, so I just will give up. And that was never occurred to me in a million years. It just, I thought, they don't see it, but I think I have something there that's, and then fortunately, at that time, when I would go back home to New York, I became exposed to more downtown experimental theater, and particularly the work of this extraordinary figure in off-Broadway history, Charles Ludlam.
And yes. I want to talk more about your early days in New York as a young adult, and we'll get to that right after this break.
Great.
Dude, that was super exciting. I can't wait to hear more from Charles Busch. But dude, before we get on to that, let's get Russell back in here. Russell, get back in here.
Hey, Rusty. Yeah, we do love Charles Busch. He's been a good friend of the show. And
dude, he's a fucking riot, bud.
And he's just funny. I mean, the stuff that he writes, if you ever get the chance to see him live, he just did a live show, so it may be a little while again. It is amazing to watch him at work. But you know what I want to talk about? Dwayne and I have been hard at work as well on the new Dead People store, based on the best-selling book by Dwayne Scott Searney, Selling Dead People's Things. And we have 111 products available right now, and it's growing every day with some great images. They're all vintage images, and all the products are based on those vintage images, and they've all got very funny sayings. So go check it out at thedeadpeoplestore.com, and you can get just fantastic merchandise there.
Dude, that's pretty sweet. 111 is almost like 190-10.
It's close to 190-10.
So
we have a lot of other products already made up, and we're releasing new ones every day. So go check them out. Don't throw your boot at the screen. Just go have a good laugh and then order something, because we can use your support as always. And now you know what we're going to do, Rusty? Part two of Charles Busch.
Yeah.
All right. I'll continue my interview with Charles Busch. We talked about his early days growing up in New York City and the experiences at Northwest University. Now we're going to find out what happened when he returned to the Big Apple. Charles, come back in. So, Charles, you were saying that you were being exposed to some of the different types of theater that was happening in New York at the late 60s, early 70s. Tell me about that.
Well, there really was a kind of a golden age of the, I guess you call it the avant-garde. And there were all these wonderful figures of Richard Foreman and Judith Malina and Tom O'Horgan, and then for me, really was Charles Ludlam, who was a playwright, actor, director, who had his own theater company called the Ridiculous Theatrical Company, and he really is a very influential figure to a lot of people. Bette Midler, I don't know, just all sorts of people could have acknowledged that. And when I saw him perform in one of his plays, it just opened up a whole world to me of what I thought. Oh, you know, the very things that seemed to make me unemployable were celebrated in his aesthetic, and he had male actors playing female characters, and he himself. I mean, it's funny that people write about him as being like this great drag star when out of 36 plays, I think only 4 of the roles were female, but you know that so that he's kind of typed. But yeah, he was just phenomenal performer, and great charisma. So when I saw him and his company, it gave me inspiration to really write, to be more serious about my writing. And I'd always been writing plays since I was a little kid, but I guess my love of performing was so overwhelming that I didn't really think about being a writer. But when I would imagine that after seeing Ludlam creating roles for himself, that I thought, well, that's what I should do. That maybe that the only way I can be an actor is to create the part for my very special abilities.
Did you contact him?
Yeah, well, I had seen him a number of his plays, and then well, I guess maybe it was what year? It might have been my senior year at college, I guess, perhaps. And yes, it was. He was touring, and his company, they came to play the University of Chicago, which isn't that far from Northwestern. And so my best friend Ed and I, we got there, and they were in repertory. They did, I think, a weekend, and 3 plays, and I think it was 2 plays, and then they did a workshop. And so we attended both plays, and then the workshop, and we got to meet Charles and members of his company, and so that sort of established a little bit of something there. And then after I moved back to New York a few years later, I kind of stalked him, basically, just to get him to. I didn't. I mean, if I didn't want to work with him, I didn't even really want to be friends with him. I just wanted him to think I was talented. It was odd. I don't know really what. I didn't really want anything from him. No, I just wanted him to think that I was worthy somehow. So I was, I guess I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I'd stay after I graduated from Northwestern. I stayed in Chicago 2 more years, trying to figure out how I was going to get a career going, since it was not going to be something, go to an audition or get an agent, go to an audition. That was not going to be the route. So I had to really figure it out, and started putting on plays in Chicago with my friends. But then I went at a certain point after 2 years of that, I thought I think I'm ready to go back home to New York City. And I knew no one. It seemed to me that the best route would be to be a solo performer. So I'd been working on a play for an ensemble in Chicago, but I took the play. It was called Hollywood Confidential, and I turned it into a solo play. I thought, well, I'll play all the parts, male and female. And that'll be easier to get done than a whole play with a cast and a set and all that. So I became a solo performer just out of that. That was the initial plan, and I did that for about 8 years. And I fairly soon after coming back to New York with this Hollywood Confidential solo piece, I was able to contact Charles Ludlam, and he saw me perform it in a little cabaret room, and he was very generous and let me do it as late shows after his performances on weekends. He had his own theater at this point in Greenwich Village, and I, nobody knew who I was. Nobody came to see it, but it was just a nice thing that I could be there for, a few weekends, and the few people saw me. And I think it was the first time that I was reviewed or mentioned in the Advocate, which was kind of big back then, the magazine. So it was just good. It was not a success, but it was a way to start. And I was very grateful to Charles Ludlam for giving me that opportunity. And then my really big break, though, that changed my whole life, it was years later. I had about a 10-year apprenticeship, but when we started our theater company, Ken Elliott and I started our theater company in New York, Theater in Limbo, and we did this play, Vampire Lesbians of Sodom, originally just for one weekend in this bar in the East Village, but it kind of took off, and then we produced it ourselves off Broadway at the Provincetown Playhouse in Greenwich Village. And that opening night, when the New York Times review came out, and it was an incredible rave review, and I'd never been reviewed in New York, and that just really overnight changed my entire life. The day before, I was still working as an office temp during the day, and from that moment on, I could earn my living in show business, and everything,
Wow.
everything, great that's happened to me. It really can be traced back to that night. Yeah,
Where did that show go?
More glamorous opening nights since, but nothing can be better. Where I came from and the day before and where I was the next day, it can never be as powerful as that.
Tell me the trajectory of that show. What it played at your theater for a while, and then what happened to it?
Well, it really was just this, again, a really a miracle. We had, I had been doing this, my solo performances and booking myself around the country at different theaters, but it could get a little grim, but I played it, I performed frequently in San Francisco and all these different places, but it wasn't adding up to anything. I still couldn't earn a living ultimately, and since I draw well, my main source of income was as a quick sketch portrait artist, on the sidewalk and working at art fairs and on the boardwalk and seaside resorts like Wildwood, New Jersey, and it was a painful period, when you think you have so much to offer and yet you just can't earn a living, and that's how mainly people are judged. So, and I just finally I had a friend who a very fascinating Pakistani performance artist named Veena Sharif, and she invited me to see her do her act way down the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It was kind of scary back then. It was an area called Alphabet City because the avenues are all named just Avenue A, Avenue B, Avenue C. It's way on the far side of the island, Manhattan Island. And in those days, it was pretty dicey. And anyway, Ken and I went to see Veena do her act, and she was playing in this little storefront art gallery bar called Limbo Lounge. And Veena's show she was fabulous. And I was so entranced by this raffish place, this tiny little narrow storefront place that seemed like kind of that of Berlin in the 1920s. And I immediately, as soon as her show came down, I found the young man who owned the venue, and I said I would just love to perform here, and it was so loose. He just looked on his calendar and said, "I'll give you these 2 dates, Friday and Saturday, a month from now. I thought, I'll take it. Well, basically what happened was we were doing these shows at the Limbo Lounge, and then we got this following so fast, so quickly, really in a matter of months. And particularly when we would bring back Vampire Lesbians, because we did a whole number of different plays. Particularly Vampire Lesbians, the response was so big, and Ken and I were kind of like, really? We didn't think it was that good. But my solo material was much more complicated and personal. But that piece, somehow people just got into it. And Ken said, well, maybe this is the commercial break that has eluded us for a decade. And we tried to get producers down there to transfer it to real theater, and they wouldn't touch it. And then finally Ken said we should just produce it ourselves, and he worked out a budget of it seemed like an enormous amount of money, $55,000, and we raised it really fairly quickly when you actually think about it, within 6 months maybe. And everybody pitched in, everybody's family, friends, everyone pitched in. We got it together, and we were able to, and then we got a hold of the Provincetown Playhouse on McDougal Street here in the Village, and it was a historic theater that Eugene O'Neill had founded in the 20s, but had fallen on hard times, and it was known as a jinxed house. Nothing ever ran there. So we got a very cheap rent because the landlord thought we'd probably only be there a weekend, and we only had raised enough money to open. We had nothing in reserve. But then that opening night came, and we got this incredible rave review in the New York Times. And it just was that I'll never forget it. Ever. I get emotional just reliving it.
I'm sure.
Well, yeah, because we were so terrified because we would have closed the next day. And I don't know what would have, I just don't know. I don't like to even think what would have happened.
Oh, you can't. How long did you run there at the Province?
5 years.
Gee.
5 years. It's one of the longest. It's one of the longest running. One could say that it's the longest running straight play, non-musical in off-Broadway history. I believe. I mean, you could debate this one or that one, but I'm going to say, it ran like, I don't know, like 1,700 performances. So it was nuts. But we were in it. We stayed in it for the original cast about 2 years, and then we were getting kind of bored, and we weren't used to that kind of long run, and it was a hard play to sustain because there was like no play there. It was just kind of these almost sketches. But we went back to the Limbo Lounge to do a play called Gidget Goes Psychotic.
All right, we've got plenty more to talk about, and we will when we take right after this break. We'll be right back.
Dude, that was super exciting to hear more from Charles Busch. Let's get Russell back and get his take on things.
Oh, I always love to hear from Charles Busch. There is someone I bet
there's something even more exciting you want to talk about right now, bud.
There is. And you know what next week's show is?
No.
It's that 190th one you've been talking about.
Oh, yeah, the one we keep talking about. 190th.
Yeah, or for most people, that would be called the 200th show of Amber Live, and that will happen next Sunday, June 23rd. We're going to have messages from some of our past guests. We're going to have clips from the show. You might even get to see Amber in the very first episode. If I end up putting that in, I think I will. And I think we'll have a new message from Amber, and some Rusty Peen may appear. I know Rocco will be there. It's going to be a great show and a lot of fun. And we want you all to be there for the 200th episode of Amber Live.
Dude, that's not a real number, bud.
Yeah, I know. 190-10 in Rusty speak.
Say it right.
Exactly. And now, you know what we're doing, Rusty?
We're seeing part 3 of part 1 of Charles Busch's multi-part interview.
You are correct. Here we go.
All right, we have more to talk about with Charles Busch. We just finished the Vampire Lesbians of Sodom saga, and now we're going on to what comes next. All right, Charles, come back in, please. Okay, so you started mentioning the origins of Psycho Beach Party, but there was another name that called it.
Oh, well, the thing was, yeah, we were in this long run, our little troupe, and we were very young, and we just, it was hard sustaining the energy of doing the show 8 times a week, month after month. And so we thought it'd be fun, when you're young, you got endless energy to do late shows at the Limbo Lounge in the East Village. So we would do our, Friday and Saturday night show at 8 o'clock, full play, and then we'd keep our wig caps on and jump into taxis, go across town, and our audience would be waiting already, in their seats, and we come down the aisle, and we throw in our costumes and do. It was called Gidget Go Psychotic, and it was it was a spoof of Beach Party movies and the TV show Gidget. And that got a great response, in some ways better than Vampire Lesbians. And again, I guess Ken thought, well, maybe we should transfer that as well, and I'd done a big rewrite on the play, and I started thinking that it was actually had a little more to it than just being a spoof of Gidget. And we came up with the title Psycho Beach Party, and that's what we opened when we transferred it off Broadway. And it was really cool because we opened at the Players Theater, which was on the same block as the Provincetown Playhouse. And so I had for 1 year, I had 2 shows running on the same street. I mean, it really was an amazing feeling. It was so cool. Yeah. And so we replaced everybody, all of our original troupe. We went over to the Players Theater, and then my great discovery was to replace me in Vampire Lesbians was a very young man named David Drake. And we had all these auditions, and we didn't know, we'd never replaced me in a play. So we weren't even sure what we were looking for. And then one day we had auditions, and in walked David Drake. We knew this kid. He was a friend of our publicist, and he'd seen the show, like 100 times. And I thought, oh, brother, I said, it's come down to this, that the kid, Pete Sanders, kid, friends were auditioning him. And well, he'd seen the show so many times that he could totally imitate my performance. And we were all laughing so hard, and we couldn't tell if we were laughing because he was good or because that he had actually picked up at every strange little choice that I'd calcified over the years in my performance. And we bear a real resemblance, actually. Our bone structures are similar. And so we thought, well, what if, I actually coached him on all the choices I was making, so he would understand what was behind the choice. And so we gave him the part, and then and we did that. I worked very closely with him, and he did it very well. And then eventually he played it longer than I did. Oh, he did thousands of performances. Oh, he did it for like 2 years off and on, and then kind of found his own performance, and he was marvelous. We owe him a lot. No, Psycho Beach Party though ran about a year. Yeah. And then it was made into a movie, but not for a long time. I had a wonderful manager who just passed away about a year ago, Jeff Mill, and he kept thinking that Psycho Beach Party should be a movie, and I didn't really see it. I thought it was so rooted in the theater, but he kept pursuing it, and it took about 8 years. I kind of didn't even think about it, but finally it all worked out that Jeff began representing a young film director, Bob King, and Bob King had an association with Strand Releasing, the production company, and they wanted to make a movie with him. And so Jeff Melnick thought, well, then you should make a movie of Charles's play, and it all worked out after 8 years. and it became a movie that has kind of a cult following. Yeah.
Yes, we have a clip of that. Russell, let's
Oh,
see
yeah?
it.
I guess we are the only ones watching the movie. These guys have only one thing on their minds. Want a wiener?
There are some prize tomatoes in that tin can. I could feel it in my nuts. You and your nuts.
You kids think you own this beach. Think it's a teenage world where you're dead wrong. Let me help you with that.
Have I been acting strange lately? Who do you have to get a hot dog in this dump?
What?
Soleado por la mañana al mediodía.
Surfer chick with a split personality. Should I unpack my bongos? I intend to unpack mine.
All right, guys, come on. That's enough. Ah! What the hell is that?
Help me.
I hate to say this, but I think our little chipper may be the butcher at Malibu Beach.
Strange that the victim had only one testicle stuffed in his mouth.
Well, that's because he only had one. Plenty of meat. Only one potato.
A little sex.
I believe this is what you young people call it. A gangbang.
A little sin.
I've been a bad boy.
Bad boys get spanked.
A little psycho.
Kiss my ass, monkey.
Party till you drop. Dead.
I hope you put some Bactine on that scratch.
Psycho beach party.
That's the most exciting story idea I've heard in years.
Wow, that's a really good trailer.
How much involvement did you have in the movie? Obviously, you were in it, but did you have any creative consultants? Or
Well, I mean, I wrote it. I mean, I wrote the adaptation, although I worked very closely with the director. I'd never, written a screenplay before, and Bob King was very good, and so he it was really his idea. The stage play had very little plot, and Bob had the idea that it should also be an homage to 70s slasher movies, which I wasn't really familiar with. So that gave the whole, thriller plot to it, which was quite successful. And then they wanted me in the movie, but it wasn't going to be that stylized where I could at 40 be playing the young girl. So I had to think, who would I play? I could be the mother. I didn't really want to do that. And then I thought, well, if it's a thriller, then there should be a detective. And I thought, I'll be like the Susan Hayward sort of police detective. And so I wrote that part in, and that was a lot of fun. But I other than that, though, I really wasn't around that much. It really was Bob's movie.
but it wasn't your last movie that you've made, because Die, Mommy, Die. Tell me about Die, Mommy, Die.
Oh, I'm very proud of that. What a dream come true. While we were, how do we go? Because the two movies are sort of related in that I guess I was going to go to LA to make Psycho Beach Party the movie, and Ken Elliott was living in LA with the idea that maybe he was thinking about trying to get into TV directing, and so he said he was living in LA, and he said, well, since you're going to be out here, what if we also did a play? Well, that's kind of nutty, but I said, well, I thought I knew that Bob King kind of wanted me out of his hair, and that I'd only be shooting for 10 days. So I thought, well, why not? So I had to write something very quickly, and I had become very close with a young man named Carl Andrus, who's been my collaborator now for about 25 years. But Carl was fairly new to my life, and I knew that I wanted him to come out to LA and be part of this experience. So we were trying to come up with a story, and Carl said, well, maybe if we thought of, some classic or a fable or, that we could sort of base the story on. And then I thought of Clytemnestra and the House of Atreus, and I thought, oh, well, that would be kind of an interesting story, but make it like a Betty Davis, Joan Crawford 60s suspense movie.
We have the trailer of Die, Mommy, Die, so let's watch that.
Screen siren Angela Arden. You've heard the rumors, you've read the gossip, but now for the first time, the real story can be told.
Your mother is a sorceress. She's a witch.
Nothing but trash washed over the Canadian border.
Prepare yourself for a shocking tale of blinding ambition, forbidden love, and murder.
Kill mother.
All captured in color and told against the backdrop of sensational Hollywood. And introducing a new star in young Mr. Jason Priestley.
You and I made some heavy promises, baby! Get out!
Yes, Angela Arden's back, and she's ready for her close-up.
This time, it's for me! For me! For me!
That's a great trailer. That was a great trailer.
You didn't have any fun doing that, did you?
God, I just loved every second. It was such a dream come true. I had such a dream come true. I just couldn't believe my great fortune. Every day is like, what fabulous thing do I do today?
Oh my God, the costumes, the sets, everything, the wigs, beautiful.
It really was so much fun to be with, and I just, it was just heaven. Yeah. It was a great experience of my life. And it's so sad that Mark Rucker died young. It's his only film. And but I have good news actually, because it's been a bit of a lost film. It's never been released for streaming, and I think the only way you can buy it is finding, just the occasional copy on eBay or something. But Wolf Distribution is going to restore it, and it's going to be available for all of that, shortly. So I'm thrilled, because it was so painful for me to think that, something that I'm so proud of could just be, kind of lost.
Dude, that was so great. It was even better than the first time that I saw that interview. And now it wouldn't be a complete show on Amber Live if we didn't hear from Rocco Zamboni.
Hey, how you guys doing? Hey, Amber, how you doing? It's me, Rocco, in case you didn't know. Listen, I just wanted to acknowledge that today is Father's Day, right? It's the day when we say, hey, Dad, you did all right. And hopefully you did. But, sometimes people are like, what should I get my father for Father's Day? So they get a tie, they get golf balls, they take him fishing. There's always that sort of crap you could always do. But maybe you might want to do something different, like say, hey, let's go hunting for UFOs. And you take them out at night, and you just stare up at the sky, and every time a satellite goes by on an airplane, you go, hey, it's a UFO! And you have a lot of laughs. That's just one thing. The other thing you can do is maybe go to a strip club. Those clubs are where you go there and you strip wallpaper off the walls. I was kidding there. But, there's a lot of things you can do to bond with your father. And maybe you should go do them. Don't ask me what they are. Why are you asking me? You should know. You know your father. Now, unfortunately, some people, their fathers are no longer here. I'm sorry, my father's no longer here either. I used to go with Carmine Zamboni. We used to go to cannoli eating contests and stuff. We'd enter, he'd win, and then he'd throw up all over the place. It was brilliant. So those are fond memories I have of my dad. That and fishing. And we went canoeing once. We tipped over. It was hilarious. We lost everything. So anyway, give your dad a call. throw him up a prayer, say, thanks, Dad, I've turned everything out all right. But, gee, thanks, Dad. Look at the shit show that I am. But either way, your dad, hopefully he tried hard. He did the best he could, you know? Right? Dads do the best they can? What do I know? Anyway, have a good time. Happy Father's Day. Go do whatever the hell you gotta do. This is Rocco saying, see you later.
Dude, that was hilarious and also a little fucked up. Well, that's all the show that we have to kill the time on today. Be sure to tune in next week at the 200th episode of Amber Live. It's going to be sweet, dude. I'm stoked. And now, let's wrap things up with some Boog and Shoog. Yeah?
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
What are you going on about now?
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us.
I heard you. But you know that Jeffrey the Giraffe is unemployed and living under a bridge now, right? I think he gives neck jobs for money. Talk about a deep throat.
Stop it. Where do you get these horrible lies?
Where else? Fox News.
Seriously, folks, Fox is scary.